Hello there, BookTube. My name is Daniel. Welcome back to my channel, Guilty Feet. I've got no rhythm. Today I'm going to take you through all the books I've read since the beginning of the year. So it's a big catch-up. I haven't done my last couple of weeks Friday Reads back home in Israel, and just thought to tell you what I've been reading. So when I was last reading something, it was this. Leonard and Hungry Paul by Ronan Hession, published by Blue Moose. They've got this lovely logo, and you can see it again on the back. What I like best about the thing is on the title page, you've got the normal black and white, and they still put Blue Moose. They do that in blue, and the rest of the book is very simply presented. But I just thought it was a nice touch. Anyway, Leonard and Hungry Paul. I don't remember how I came to this. Someone recommended and said it was charming and low stakes and just a great read for anybody. And so I ordered a copy and read it, and it is everything that I was promised. So then, as I mentioned, I was reading it last time, someone said, Brian at Bookish and Sean the Book Maniac had loved and read this book 2 or 3 years ago. I think before I was on BookTube, and I went back and watched their videos, and yeah, they called it, and I've stumbled across it by coincidence, but they absolutely nailed it back then. Wonderful. It just a joy and happiness, and people wrestling with the simple things in life, and there's forward movement, but always in a positive direction, low anxiety, and just a fabulous time spent in the company of lovely characters. I really enjoyed this, and I will look out. I know he's got another book out. This was his first book. I think he's a musician. There's some songs of his on YouTube, and he's transitioning into writing, as other musicians have. But this Leonard and Hungry Paul is everything I could ever want from a book. Just wonderful. Really enjoyed that. After that, I read. So this was I finished that on. At the end of December. So I think I finished that Friday night, the 30th of December, going into New Year's Eve, which was on a Saturday. We were staying with my wife's sister in London still. And then I stayed up and started this. This is Nick Hornby's Dickens and Prince. And I just made a whole video about all the Nick Hornby books I've read, which turns out to be a weird sum. I think it should be up before this, so you should be able to find the video where I talk about all my Nick Hornby books, up to and including Dickens and Prince. This whole thing is under 100 pages. It's deliciously purple, a la Prince. It is that perfect Venn diagram of highbrow and lowbrow, although, of course, for many, Dickens at his time was never highbrow only perhaps through our 21st century eyes. Just a great fun. Reminded me why I like Hornby's non-fiction. I had some good experiences with his fiction, but I just think he's a great essayist and writer of popular culture. Dickens and Prince by Nick Hornby, and I got this in the half-price sale. I bought this in foil, so instead of the cover price of £10, which is a reasonable amount anyway, to get it for a £5 I thought was really good. So I read that. Then next so this is my first book of 2022, and I picked a big fiction book to start off with, a big fiction winner from 2021. And now this is also in the tournament of books this year, so I'm pleased I've got this under my belt, because I'll be discussing this in March when they have the big tournament. But this is a book that many of you read already, Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin, who I think previously has written YA, and this is a big successful novel that sold a lot, and a lot of people have read it. And I dived into it knowing that it was going to be a big, chunky novel about 21st century life, and I was all in for about 200, 300 pages maybe even, and then as it sort of barreled towards the end, and bad things happened to good people, and just plot and more plot, and realized it was less really about characters and more about just getting them somewhere and arriving at an endpoint, and it just sort of the was not the sum of its parts, and did not succeed for me by the end, and became kind of irritating and sort of transparently manipulative in ways that I didn't enjoy. So it wasn't just that I sort of my opinion of it soured. From quite enjoying the convoluted and the milieu that we were learning about, to actually go, oh God, so this, that's what you're going to do, and sort of unresolved, and putting people through pain unnecessarily, or your characters, and not having the skills of, say, Hanya Yanagihara. I think it's, on a similar vein. I read The Animators by Kayla Whitaker or Kayla Ray something. It was triple barreled. Anyway, it was a fabulous book. I love that very much. Really did not come away with this with a great feeling at the end. As some nice elements, and then the whole less than the sum of those. Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. Then my wife and I, in the new year, spent 2 or 3 days away from my mother's in London. She lent us the car, and we drove out to the countryside, and we spent a day in Chichester, which is a tiny cathedral city west of London, about 2 hours west of London. We started in Chichester for the day, and then we slept overnight in a place called Petworth, where there is a converted railway station, and we slept 2 nights in a converted Pullman carriage, which was lovely, and the whole thing. You can look it up, the old railway station. It was a great place, very reasonable. Had a great vegan full English breakfast the next morning. But on my day out or just to give you a taste of what we do when we travel, wherever I go, I'm looking at secondhand bookshops. And the beauty of English towns these days is that every village has, if not a secondhand bookshop, has charity shops with a wide selection of second. So I just went in Chichester. I must have gone into 6 or 7 different charity shops, and they also had an excellent Oxfam charity shop that was books only. So all charity shops have a book section, and you can occasionally find something very interesting, current, for a ridiculously cheap price. So there might be a review copy or a recent hardback that someone's read and given up or not wanted, or after Christmas might have been gifted something and given away. Or it was a bit too close to Christmas for the poorly received gifts to end up in charity shops. But that often, I think that may be a source. Anyway, a great secondhand bookshop, Oxfam charity store in Chichester, and I actually bought a couple of books there. One of which was a book I already have. So 1 second, I think it's right here. Yeah. One of them, I bought a copy of To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee, which I had and I've read many years ago, and my kids lent my copy to someone and it never came back. And I saw this for £2 and thought, you know what, I love lending books to people. I would like the next person who needs to borrow a copy of To Kill a Mockingbird to be able to find one in my library. So this is a rare example of me replacing a book that went missing from the library, just because I think it's a good one to have in the home, and it was nice. I actually had an older Penguin edition, which was I think nicer than this one, but I like this edition. And this must be from, let's find out exactly when this one's from. This is from 1972. But nice. So I picked that up and put that back in the library. And then bought another book. So I bought that for £2, and then I also bought this, which I've never read, and like this edition even more. And this is Bonjour Tristesse by Francoise Sagan. Bonjour. I say that anyway. I never read Bonjour. I'm going to do it this way. I never read Bonjour Tristesse. It always shows up on these lists of great sort of 20th century classics. Seemingly, she wrote this when she was like 19. So she was the night-crawling Layla Motley of her day. And lovely. Look at this fabulous Penguin edition. This is, I think I'll tell you what it's from. This is from 1960. Let's see, translated by Irene Ash. And I had never read it. I didn't know what it's about. I knew there was a book called Bonjour Tristesse. I think I knew what Bonjour Tristesse meant, but hadn't read it till now, and just picked this up, devoured this in an afternoon. It's again, so 1 second. This is my first purchase of 2023, and I read it straight away, and this is 100 pages. Perhaps the most French thing I have ever read. I realize everyone watching this may have already read this book. Perhaps the most French thing I have ever read. A slightly melodramatic ending, which I won't spoil for anyone, but just, it is just full of ennui and summer and beach life and driving out to casinos and getting drunk when you're too young and drinking Bordeaux or red wine with breakfast. It's just full of Frenchness. Very French, very sharp insights into the mind of this teenage girl who is watching her father. Her mother is long gone. Her father having flirtations with and relationships with 1-2 different women, and this willful child on the cusp of adulthood, wanted to get involved, wanted to keep her father to herself, but also wanting him to be happy. Sort of complicated, but also through essentially a child's eyes. Really wise, considering that this woman was a child when she wrote this. Wise and knowing, and as I say, desperately French. Kind of wonderful. So happy in my 50s to have read Bonjour Tristesse for the first time, and just loved it, and love having this delicious paperback copy from 1916, this wonderful old orange Penguin paperback original. Enjoyed that very much. Next up was another tiny little book which I ordered and had delivered to my mum's, and this is On Tyranny by Timothy Snyder, which came out originally, I think, in just after Trump was elected, and it was a book addressing what Trump's presidency was anticipated to be. And this book On Tyranny is full of tips and tricks about how to manage and how to avoid tyranny. Snyder is a professor of something. He's a serious geezer. One second. Levin Professor of History at Yale. Okay, so he's the real deal. Author of Bloodlands, Europe Between Hitler and Stalin, and Black Earth: The Holocaust as History and Warning. So he's not a nobody, Snyder, and he knows of what he speaks. I guess if I had any criticism, so this was a quick read, and on one hand, it's sort of profoundly depressing one. I think a lot of this holds up, certainly for me living in Israel in 2022 under the current government. I think this holds up from how the perception of what America was going to become late 2016 when Trump was elected the first time. Sorry, when Trump was elected. God, that was a terrible slip. So sadly, a lot of this still holds up, and the lessons still need to be learned. I guess if I had one criticism, it's that he leans heavily as the example of what happens when you don't stand up to tyranny, is all Holocaust based. While I fully acknowledge the impact and the tragedy and the horror of the genocide under German rule in the 30s and 40s, I think I think this might have benefited from having a slightly broader range of sources. I think there are plenty of other instances. Even in my, I've read books about China under Mao, and I think some of that might have been could have fed its way. And he does touch on things, touch on Stalin a little bit, but the lessons are for now. The lessons are for us today, and how to confront these things. It's the examples of where the progression of such behaviour has led to horrible things is mostly sort of Germany in the 30s. But it's a quibble. This was still a depressingly prescient read, even 4 years on from when this was urgently written and published. On Tyranny by Timothy Snyder. Okay, after that, I started reading this new-ish novel. So even though I got a full backlog of in my TBR, as is often the case, I'm reading the stuff I bought most recently first. Not great. I'll try and create some balance this year, but I just like to read new things while they're still new. So this is new to me. Plenty of people read it 6-7 months ago. Simon Thingy in the UK was raving this is one of his books of the year. Foyles named this their book of the year, and I bought this in Foyles and got it at half price, even though I don't think it was supposed to be at half price. And I'm talking about I'm a Fan by Sheena Patel. On the back, a twisted romance blazing with angry verve. The Observer named it the top 10 best debut novelists. Olivia Sujic, who I don't know who that is, said characteristically mesmerizing, powerful and finely observed. And Niven Govindan said, pure fire from start to finish, Sheena Patel is the future. Yeah, I really, really didn't enjoy this at all. I love the presentation, the sort of square, naked hardback. I don't know if you can see the material there, and published by Rough Trade Books, which I'm trying to find out if this actually has any connection with Rough Trade Records. And I don't think it does, except they just liked the name and took it to be a book publisher. I don't think there's any financial or any business relationship between Rough Trade Records, which was the Smiths record label back in the early 80s, and Rough Trade Books. Anyway, this is a book that really annoyed the hell out of me. The whole thing is a first-person narration from the mind of a stalker, and who's in a relationship with I think she refers to him always as the man I want to be with. She never names him. He's the man I want to be with, and he's has some kind of fame where he's is rich and travels the world and is people listen to him. Anyway, and so she talks about the man I want to be with, and she also talks about the woman I'm obsessed with. So those are the two people that she's kind of stalking, and low-level stalking on internet, on Instagram and Facebook. The man she wants to be with, the man I want to be with, as it's called, is somebody she has had some kind of physical relationship with. He's married. He's also had a relationship with the woman I'm obsessed with, the narrator, and then proudly tells the narrator about how mind-blowing the sex is with the woman that the narrator is obsessed with, who's his mistress, but he has lots of affairs with her. But he also occasionally meets up and hooks up with the narrator, although recently their relationship has been sort of sexless and weird. And the narrator also has a boyfriend who she's clearly cheating on, both physically and actually on occasion, but then also just emotionally most of the time. It's all just pretty unpleasant. I don't think it is terribly transgressive to write a book where someone is following someone on Instagram. Oh yeah, I get that. That's terribly 21st century, but it's now 2022. Well, I think that may have been something interesting in 2015. I don't think it was terribly interesting here. I don't think there's anything particularly transgressive about a 30-year-old woman who enjoys having sex and wants to talk about, sometimes she wants to have rough sex and the sex with her boyfriend isn't really satisfying, but the man she wants to be with, I don't know, I think it tries to be, it's trying very hard. I think again, don't want to conflate the author with the narrator, but the narrator is just a deeply unlovable human being, but we're supposed to believe that her friends think this and her job keeps her in that, and this man she wants to be with, who's got seemingly unlimited options, also desires her and wants to spend time with her occasionally, or at least be in this weird psychosexual text message relationship with. Just a real have your cake and eat it horseshit kind of narrative that, again, I may have just aged out of reading millennial books, but my sense is this author has as well. This is not written by an earnest, urgent 22-year-old. I think it's not for me to talk about ageism. I'm aware that I suddenly sound like ageist, misogynist, racist reviewer of this book. And I don't have a good answer for that. I don't think that's my response to it. I just thought this didn't work, and I thought it was trying too hard, and it just made me feel a bit queasy, and hiding behind this unlikable. I've read books by women writing unlikable narrators. I read last year Boy Parts by Eliza Clark, which was genuinely transgressive and genuinely an unpleasant lead character who was intriguing and interesting, and you're trying to work out how these things happen and how she got into these relationships and why are people still giving her the time of day, but I think the answer's there in the narrative. Her ability to pass as normal, her ability to function on some kind of practical level and pay the rent, so to speak, while all this crazy stuff is going on. I think that's all in the text. I don't think it was here. I think this was weak. Certainly not one of the top 10 debut novelists. I really struggled with this. I didn't enjoy the reading of it. I didn't enjoy the characters in it, and I think it was kind of shit. So back home, always, there was a whole bunch of books in a row with no graphic novels. Some of you must be wondering, because I was away. I read that book on the plane on the way back to Israel. And when I got back to Israel, started reading graphic novels again. So this is Hellboy Volume 9. I picked up a whole bunch of these, remember, about 18 months ago, and I'm working my way through them. And this is a return to form. So after a couple of sort of dull ones that I didn't really understand why I was doing this big Hellboy reading project, The Wild Hunt is really good. This is an 8-part series. So these were originally 8 individual comics. So that's a meaty amount for a mini-series. and it's good stuff, and it's good stuff about the origins of Hellboy. You found out who really is, who he's actually descended from. No spoilers. We get old characters come back who we've seen before. We get the rise of Morgan Le Fay. We get some nasty blood witch trying to bring down hell on earth, and Hellboy right in the middle of things. Really enjoyed that. I don't have. I've got book 11, and I don't have book 10, so I need to track that down, because I think book 10 is just a filler issue, so I could probably read book 11 before I read book 10, but I'm a bit neurotic that way, so I don't. Okay, Hellboy, The Wild Hunt. I thought that was one of the best ones in ages. Then I read another new book. Now, I was going to do a whole thing, a separate video about this author, and go through all the books that I've read by this author, and then I thought about it, I thought, wait, didn't I do this before? And went back and found that just over a year ago, I did a whole long video about all the, when I read his last book, went through all the other books of his that I read. There's about 8 up there on the shelf. Anyway, we're talking about George Saunders. This is his short story collection, Liberation Day, which was a must read for me because I've read, I think, almost everything that George Saunders published. And when he did his At Swim in a Pond in the Rain, which is a magnificent piece of non-fiction about short story writing and his lectures in short stories that he's given to his students, and just a fantastic, a zippy, fun, and intellectually challenging and wonderful, rewarding piece of non-fiction writing for us, for readers of short fiction. And so this is his latest collection of short fiction, his first one since 10th of December, so I think 10 years plus. We had Linger in the Bardo, and then we had At Swim in the Pond in the Rain. I think I always call it At Swim with Two Birds, which is something, is that Malachi McCourt? Anyway, no, it's Flannery O'Brien. I don't know, I'm Irish. I don't know. There's something called At Swim Two Birds, right? What's that? Who wrote that? Anyway, I haven't read it. This is Liberation Day. It just a terrific collection of George Saunders short stories. The reason why he is described as the greatest short story writer in the world today. This is a collection, I would say, where the stories, and there are, so the whole thing's like 250 pages, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 stories. And the first one is called Liberation Day, is 60 pages long. I think 4 or 5 of them have previously been published. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 originally published in the New Yorker. So if you are a regular reader of the New Yorker, you might have encountered some of these stories before. I am not, because I can't consume, even though I love the idea of the New Yorker, I can't consume fiction that way in a magazine. I just tend to skim it and don't read it the way I do when it's in a book. So I don't read the short stories in the New Yorker, or even the first chapters of things. It's frustrating because I would love to be a regular reader of the New Yorker, and it's just not a good way for me to. Anyway, I got his new collection. Any of these stories, in my opinion, any of these stories could have appeared in any of Saunders' short story collections over the last however long it is since he first published the early 90s. I don't think any new ground has been broken here. I think we're revisiting many of the themes and tropes that he's spoken about before, and I don't care. I'm here for it. I don't reread things. Like, I'm not going back to his old story collections, even though some of the images have stayed in my mind. There's that thing in the sort of Renaissance fair / amusement park, and very many of those themes revisited here. People who are in places that are not what they seem, weird scenarios where people are trapped inside and serving or playing a part that they're kind of stuck in. We see that again and again. There was there's a story here called A Mum of Bold Action, which was really fascinating and great, and then another one called A Thing at Work, which was kind of disturbing, reminded me a little bit of Joshua Ferris's and then we came to the end narrative, workplace narrative, weirdo short story. I love this. So on the one hand, more of the same. On the other hand, if it ain't fixed, if it ain't broke, why fix it? So if you like George Saunders, if you've got off on his short stories in the past, I think you'll enjoy this. Is this an urgent read in hardback? Perhaps not. Maybe you can wait for the paperback, because I think you can read his short story collections in any order. Now, someone probably has already published a whole treatise about why this is an enormous step forwards or step backwards, evolution in his writing, or a devolution in his writing style. But for me, it was definitely more so. So if I'm wrong, and then someone's noticed that this is very, very different to everything he's done before, then sue me. But I thought it was very similar to everything I've read of his before, and loved it just as much. Liberation Day by George Saunders. Then I had this sitting on my shelf for a year. I brought this home from New York a year ago. This is the 5th edition in the Bad Machinery series by John Allison. These lovely outsize paperbacks. This is volume 5. This was originally published as a webcomic, so you have these panels are all like that. And it's set in a small town in England, and the protagonists are school children, sort of, I think, 9, 10, 11 years old. I just got a text message from Benny Gantz, leader of the opposition, or Israeli politician in opposition. That's constantly getting political WhatsApps in this country. Diminishing returns, I think, a little bit for volume 5. I don't think, in previous volumes, I actually enjoyed the fact that the panels might end on a punchline, so they function still as webcomic, screenshots where you follow the story and there was a beat to each thing rather than everything taking place over the entire course of the book. So for me, less successful as the story here. There's always in these things a sort of kind of supernatural element. So in this one, there is a selkie, which is a seal, comes out of the ocean, sheds its fur, and becomes a human being. And in this case, when someone steals the fur without realizing it belongs to a selkie, so that person is trapped in a human body. And that's a sort of a traditional myth. I think British. I think the selkies are British, maybe Scottish even. And that's kind of thing. But the school kids meet them, and this kid. All the humor is this creature who's really a part seal, part human, having to adjust and go to school and be treated and whatever. This is the case of the fire inside. To me, the case of the diminishing returns. Okay, but I think there are 3 more volumes of this. I picked them up for like $5-6 each instead of the $20 they originally sold for. So I don't mind the price. I think they look great on the shelf. I've got all these lined up, and I'm up to 5 now. So that may be a reason to pick up 6, 7, 8. But I'm not in a rush, and maybe won't ever. And then the book having a book avalanche. And then the book I'm currently reading was the arc I got sent of Percival Everett's Dr. No. I'm about 100 pages in. I will probably read most of this tonight. Benny Gantz again. I'll read more of this tonight, maybe finish it, and then decide what I'm going to read next. So far, so accessible, fun, enjoyable. Dr. No by Percival Everett. I'll let you know how I get on with that. And that's all. God bless. Bye.